Okay, so far we've done 3 types of factoring, and each one of those types is going to come up in this review. I'm going to do an example of each, but when you're going through these problems, you're going to have to identify what strategy you have to use. So the first one is when a equals 1. Okay, so the number in front of x squared is 1. In that case, all we need to do is find factors of negative 28 that add to 3. In this case, it's going to be 7 and negative 4. 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. 7 minus 4 is 3. And so to factor this expression, you just have to do x plus 7 quantity, x minus 4. And that's going to be your answer. So those are the most straightforward. You might get ones where there's a common factor between each of the terms. So here, the common factor is 5x. Or in this case, we can use negative 5x. If I factor out negative 5x, I end up with, so negative 5x cubed divided by 5x is 5, I'm sorry. We'll do it down here. Negative 5x is x squared. Negative 5x squared over negative 5x is x. And then 210 divided by negative 5x is negative 42. The next thing you have to check is, can you factor this expression further? And in this case, you can. So we have to find factors of negative 42 that add to 1. In this one, it's 7 and negative 6. 7 times negative 6 is negative 42. 7 minus 6 is 1. So we can factor this further and say negative 5x times x plus 7, quantity x minus 6. Sometimes you can't factor this expression further. In that case, you would leave it as is, but here we could. Okay, last type of problem. None of these factors, none of these terms have a common factor. And when that's the case, we have to employ that method we looked at last week. So our first step is we multiply a times c. A is 4, and c is negative 27. And that's going to give us negative 108. So now we have to find factors of of negative 108 that add to b, which is 12. And this turns out to be 18 and negative 6. Now, if you're having trouble coming up with factors of negative 108, we talked about that calculator trick. So what you can do is you can do negative 108 over x in your y equals. And then you can go to the table. And what you can see is any of the whole numbers here are the whole number factors of 108. So you would have 4 and negative 27, 6 and negative 18, and you can test all those until you get something that works. And so here it was 18 and negative 6. Okay. So what we're going to do then is rewrite this expression with that bx term broken up. So I'm going to do 4x squared minus 6x plus 18x minus 27. Then what we're going to do is we're going to split this up into the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms, and we're going to factor out, we're going to find a common factor between the first 2 terms. So in that case, it's going to be 2x, and factor that out. So I'm left here with 4x squared over 2x is 2x, negative 6x over 2x is 3. And we're going to do the same thing over here. The common factor between 18x and negative 27 is 9. And with that factored out, 18x divided by 9 is 2x. Negative 27 divided by 9 is negative 3. Notice that the term in the parentheses is identical, and so we can use the distributive property to rewrite. I'm going to do that down here and say 2x plus 9, 2x minus 3. So the 2x plus 9 ends up in its own term. And that's our final answer. So those are the three strategies we used. The first one, when a is 1, you just have to find factors of c that add to b. If there's a common factor between all three terms, you can just factor that out and see if you can then factor the expression further. If there isn't a common factor between all three terms, then you have to employ this 5-step strategy in order to find the factored expression.